This week, we started an important series on financial planning in an austere economy, a crucial conversation to have during these times. So we have spoken about the importance of financial planning, the steps, the rules, and much more with other professionals. To continue this conversation is Prosper Melome, who is partner, corporate transactions, and investment banking at Bridgewater Advisors Limited. Happy New Year to you. Great to have you in studio to talk about this. So there are numerous purposes of financial planning. Let's start from that.
Right. So let me just say Happy New Year to all your viewers. And I'll take it off from, when we talk about financial planning at large, let's look at the current situation we are in. We are talking about austerity.
Yeah.
We are talking about a difficult economy at large. And so we can look at it from three main angles. One, looking at your objectives as a purpose. Achieving your objectives is critical, and therefore you have to consider financial planning.
Mm-hmm.
The next aspect of this is perseverance of capital. So preserving capital is a core component of financial planning. And often when you talk about financial planning, a lot of people go on about investment. But there's also the consideration of preserving capital. It's a core part. And then we also have the elements of hedging risk. So there's a lot of risk in the environment. I think earlier on we heard a professor talk about the fact that there's an assumption about government instruments being risk-free. Right. I mean, that's the belief, in finance. But then there's definitely some element of risk. And because of these uncertainties in our environment, we have to always think about ways to mitigate, to reduce this risk. And that is the reason why we consider financial planning. I
guess a lot of people are tilting towards preserving capital, especially during this time. But let's talk about the benefits of financial planning, especially during these times. As we talk about debt exchange program, people's investments, they don't know where it's going and all of that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's embedded in the purpose.
Yeah.
So we are looking at the issue of December inflation was around 54%. So basically, if you have a CD, you've lost more than half of that value at that time. So when we talk about benefits of financial planning, you are able to consider things to do within these times to more or less prevent the loss of value. Now, in our economy, it's really difficult currently, given the circumstances. The real returns are negative. Most assets are not yielding certain returns. But at large, the core value here, or the core benefit here, the core takeaway is to put in mechanisms and ways to preserve value. That's a core thing. Let me say a benefit in financial planning.
Well, based on your experience, I know businesses would tend to plan financially, but do you get the sense that individuals are doing this?
Well, I would say, the whole spectrum of financial planning, one, it's a mechanism towards achievement of goals and objectives. For individuals, yes, to some extent, there are considerations when it comes to financial planning. But I would say the issue is the level of sophistication when it comes to financial planning is quite low, and the reason being financial literacy within our market. So for individuals, not as much. For businesses and corporates, there's usually the following of a corporate calendar that has embedded in there some level of financial planning. So for individuals, not as much.
And when I hear news like what we've been discussing about the debt exchange program, I just tend to fear that people may just, the sort of progress we've made towards getting people financially included, or the financial inclusion agenda, may be stalled a bit. And that's a concern, isn't it?
That is true. That is a reality. I mean, so much has been done, even without the debt exchange bit. Let's talk about even when it comes to the mobile money component.
Yeah.
In terms of financial inclusion, we are looking at the taxes, the e-levies that are being applied to this. So definitely that has an impact. Debt exchange in this particular scenario, T-bills have been excluded so far, which has a lot of the everyday people.
For now.
Yeah, for now, let's say for now. So yes, there's the issue of that having an impact on the wider market in terms of how this is viewed.
Okay, and so that leads me to my next topic. We sort of mentioned it before we came on the air about creating an investment portfolio during these times. How do you use a financial plan to create an investment portfolio?
Well, so let me say first and foremost, when it comes to investment portfolios, it's an issue of an individual, it's on individual basis. I would say first, and I'd like to put in this key component of one needs to get proper professional advice and guidance by qualified licensed professionals in order to begin to think about investment portfolios. That said, when it comes to portfolios, there are some few things to consider. Your objectives are crucial. So we are looking at your short and long-term objectives. And then the second thing is looking at your risk profile, the kind of risk appetite you have towards, let me say, investments. And then we look at your liquidity needs. Liquidity practically meaning your need for cash.
Okay, and looking at the current circumstances, if I have money, because people are now wondering what to do, what would you advise?
Well, that would be a difficult.
I know it's based on an individual's tolerance of risk, for instance, when it comes to maybe an investment portfolio. But what are the options? What can we do?
So generally, the atmosphere. Let's paint a picture of the atmosphere. Earlier on, I mentioned the issue of high inflation. Mm-hmm. So we having high inflation, meaning that, by default, you are losing value, right? So the first thing to think about here is ways and means to preserve value. And the way to think about it in simple terms is you need to find, it could even be profitable ventures, right? To generate returns that puts you at least at par with inflation.
Any ideas, profitable ventures?
Well, you may have to see it. But generally, you would want to come at par with inflation. And if inflation is very high, then that makes it very difficult.
Wow. And during these times, as we've talked about financial planning, I hear a lot about controlling, monitoring, directing. Tell us about the steps to be an efficient financial planner. What can a business do? What can an individual do?
Right. So that's a really good question. When it comes to the steps, I think everything boils down to the objectives, right? Your objectives has to be clear in terms of what the short-term objectives are, what the long-term objectives are. That is definitely clear. 2, there's a need for professional advice. Okay, so I mentioned one of the challenges within our market.
Is it expensive to get professional advice?
It can be. It can be expensive.
That's discouraging, isn't it?
Not necessarily. So when it comes to the wider level of financial literacy, there's a lot of government intervention. We even have, for example, the SEC doing a lot of market education, and over the years, we've seen a lot of progress within our investment industry. And so you have a lot of market operators and players within the space educating the masses. So yes, there's that free education that is out there. But that aside, when one wants to go or embark on a specific agenda, it's important that you get financial advice from professionals. All right? So that is a core step to take. Now, with that step in place, one must just be committed to the process. Everything boils down to the kind of advice that is structured for the purpose of financial planning.
I'll give you 30 seconds or 20 seconds to just say something to our audience right now.
Right.
A tip, something?
Well, so generally, when it comes to the current economic environment we find ourselves in, the best thing to do is to look for ways and means to preserve value. And that is the whole idea. I would say, from my opinion, the agenda is to preserve value. This is not the time to go on wild and aggressive endeavors.
We learned something new. Preserve value. Prosper Melume, partner, corporate transactions and investment banking at Bridgewater Advisors Limited. Thank you so much for your time. And that's the marketplace.